Okay, so we just did a review of the Overtone series, and what we found is in the first octave you just get the fifth and the root. In the second octave you get the root, the third, the fifth, the flat seventh, and the root. In the third octave we get the diatonic scale suddenly starts to appear, and then the whole tones, what we call whole tones, or whole tone scale starts to happen, and then the next octave up, half tones start, or minor seconds appear, and we get minor seconds, and then whole chromatic scale winds up. Then we go up another octave, we get quarter tones, and those, and another octave up. So by the time you get to the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th overtones, you're getting quarter tone scales. And if you go higher than that, you're getting in between those. So at this point, it's white noise, essentially, or noise is happening in the scale. So a single vibrating string has a fifth and a fourth in it most perfect pristine tuning, as close to perfect as possible. Then the thirds that come in, the major third and the minor thirds, are slightly compromised. They're a little flat, a little sharp. And then what happens, and when we get to the seconds, we wind up with a whole whole tone scale, which is giving us again some irrational tunings. The second, for instance, and the flat four are off by as many as 20 cycles per second. So the tones that we have on the piano have been compromised into equal tuning and have actually been softened. So the major second could sound worse if it were on an open string, and the tritone could sound really harsh if it were on an open string. And we go higher up, you're getting the quarter tones, and then of course white noise. So within 5 octaves, that note that I'm holding in its fifth octave is producing white noise. So, and we have this order, this like a layer cake, this higher order. Now on the horn we take advantage of the fact that 1, 5, 1 can be played open, and then above that the 1, the 3, and the 5 can be played to create the major chord, and then the flat 7 can be produced as well. So I gave you a sheet there, which I had on the board in lesson 11 last time, which has all of the tuning, all of the notes there for every valve pattern. And you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 7 valve patterns, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lip positions, which are represented by the Overtone series. So the horn will produce the root of open, B flat, and then the next note that it will produce is F, which is the fifth, and then a B flat again. So that's the easiest thing to play on the horn, right there. And with that, you've got an octave. And all you need to get started to play is an octave. Now if you have a student that can't hit that high B flat, they can only hit 1 and 5, and most students that's all they can do. They're lucky if they can get these 2 open notes. You can still produce an entire octave worth of notes, because we can use the valve patterns to constantly flatten the horn. And as we flatten the horn, we can start with this 1, which is B flat, and go from B flat down to A flat, to G flat, to F, to E. And using the 6 valves, we can move that horn from B flat all the way down to E. Likewise, we can take the next lip position, which is the open fifth, and we can use that same chromatic scale to move from F to F flat or E, E flat, D, D flat, C to B. And then the next open tone would be back to the B flat. So I can go from a low E to an F above C, or in the case of this whole horn actually starts in middle C, and the first note, B flat, open B flat, is actually the note below middle C. So it starts out with B flat in the 3rd octave. So your open tone on the horn, that first note is B flat. Then the 5 would be the F above C, middle C. And so from there all the way down to the E below middle C is the bandwidth that you can play if all you can do is play 2 open notes. So if all you can play is 2 open notes, which most beginners can do, they can still play a chromatic scale using this valve pattern going all the way down to the E, which means from E to E I could have an octave, or from F to F I can have an octave. So there's actually two scales there I could play besides the chromatic scale. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by warming up on the root and the fifth, and then play this chromatic scale going down. Now what I've done is I've written on the board over here, and on the back of your paper, I've written the valve patterns out in an interesting way. I've built a 7-pointed star here, and I've shown that at the top it's 0, no valve. When we push down the second valve, it goes down one semitone, and so we go from B flat to an A horn. So by holding the second valve, I am now playing in the key of A. And I can start a pattern in the key of A, and I can use those overtones to get all those nice 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 7, 5, and can play an A scale, basically. If I hit the first valve, I'm in A flat. So that first valve there comes down 2 semitones. The third valve comes down 3 semitones, or 3 half steps, or I can play it as 1 and 2. Now, when you learned to play your horn in band, you were taught 1 and 2, not 3. Why would I use 3 as opposed to 1 and 2? 3 is a brighter sounding horn. Since there's only one valve and the horn and the air only has to bend once to go through that valve, that tone is going to be brighter and have more overtones on it. If I'm holding 2 valves down, even though it's the same number of half steps, the air is going through first the second valve, and then it goes through the first valve, and then back out to the bell. So the air is actually bending 6 times instead of 4 times. And so what happens is it cars off some of the overtones. So that tone on that 1 and 2, first and second valve, that note is going to have a different tone quality than just the third valve. I prefer to use the third valve, and got into the habit of using the third valve, because the open, first, second, and third valve all are only bending the air once, so you get the brightest tone from those things. Then when you start using the first and second valve, the second and third valve, the first and third valve, now you're bending the air through 2 valves, and so those tones are going to be more muted and not as bright or brassy sounding. And then when we're pushing all 3 of them down, that tone is even more muted and has more highs cut off of it. So the reason I'm using the third valve here is, 1, for the explanation and to prove that this overtone series works. 3, to help make up fake fingerings, alternate fingerings for things. And 4, I'm really concerned about the tone quality. So if I'm playing where I'm just using the first, second valve all the time, then what happens is if I use the third valve, I'm going to have the same bright horn. If I'm using the first and second valve and then go to the first and second valve, I'm going to have a more muted horn on that thing, and it's going to, tone-wise, it's going to sound a little weird, even though that's what you're taught. Now the reason that we're taught that is because going from here to the next valve pattern is easier to do this with your fingers than it is to do this. It's actually, playing that third valve is uncomfortable for us who've learned to play with 1 and 2. So it's just been something that's been drummed into us. So we'll play that and try that and see how that works out as well. I also drew the valve patterns. The bottom circle is the valve closest to us, valve 1. The middle circle is the second valve, and the top circle is the third circle. And then I blackened out which ones would be held down and left open so we can see it as valve patterns as well. Now, this is a microchromatic scale that I've talked about before. And if you start on any position here, you can rotate this coming down, and then when you get down to having all 3 valves held down, if you open those valves, you should have another open position or lip position below on the number 1 and be able to do the same thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start here in a minute warming up on just the 1 and the 5. Then we're going to play a chromatic scale from 5 down to 1, and then from 1 down. And we're just going to see if we can play in the key of F and in the key of E. And then in the next segment what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we can take any one of these starting positions, any valve position, and then flush out the rest of the scale, a major scale, on any valve position and not have to think about it as ABC at all. We can forget about the ABCs altogether. All we need to know is what the first note is so we know what key we're playing in. For instance, if I'm holding the third valve or the first and second valve, I'm playing the note G. So I'm going to be playing some kind of a G scale. The open tones are 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, and 7 flat. So what I need to do is figure out what the number 2 would be. I need to figure out what the valve pattern for the number 4 would be. I need to figure out the valve pattern for the number 6. And I need to figure out the valve pattern for the number 7. Because we already have 1, 3, and 5, and 7 flat, which we'll find out we won't need to use in the beginning. So the most important things here are 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. That arpeggio, that open chord arpeggio. Another thing we discussed in the last segment was how to create the third that's missing between the 1 and the 5. Because that 1 and the 5 are so far apart, that third is missing. So if we want to play 1, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 1, we have to add a valve in there. And the valve that we had to add for the open was the third valve. So we'll play that as well. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is play B flat, in your open B flat, and then use your chromatic scale going down. Do that again, going up. Try it again, down and then back up. Hit your F, that's your next lick position, and do the same thing. E flat, D flat, C, B, and then up. B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F. So you see, with just those two lip positions now, we should have a whole chromatic scale. So let's start with the F and go all the way down to the E, okay? And you can warm up with that. So I would just da 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 da, and then you're not putting a lot of pressure on your lip, and you're getting your fingerings to do it. So let's try that again from the F all the way on down. There's no extra, there's no in-between, there's no alternate fingerings. When you're that low, one valve, one note, that's pretty much it. And when you get down to that B flat, that's open again. So we have 7 tones plus 7 tones, which gives us 14, which gives us just actually 2 overlaps. We have 2 E's and 2 F's. So you can do a chromatic warm-up with your lip in the lowest possible position. Now the next thing is going from there up to the octave. So start on the B flat, your normal B flat, and then go up a half step to 1, 2, 3, and then 1 and 3, and then 2, and then 3, and now we're on the next open tone, and keep going. There, when we went from F to F sharp, we didn't start all over with the lowest possibility, right? You started with 2 and 3. So there were 2 valves that we didn't have to use. Because going from that 1 down to the 5 is only a fourth. And a fourth is 5 chromatic tones. So out of the 7, that left 2 fingerings. So that F that you played could also be played with if this is the sharp, you could play the F with 1 and 3 as well. So try playing the F open, playing it with 1 and 3. Open, 1 and 3. Now again, can you hear the difference in the tone? With the open, it's brighter because the air is only going through to the bell. But when you're holding that, you're holding 2 valves down, so you're bending the air twice, so it gets a little bit more muted. Open, muted, open, muted. Okay. Now on the E would have 2 positions. If we go down from the F, 1 position to the second valve, but it would also be all 3 valves. And there you can really hear the difference. 1 valve, 3 valve. And you can hear the difference in the tone. Major difference in the tone. So I have those 2 alternates there right now. The E and F now, we have an alternate fingering if we're going up. All right. So now we have the scale going to our first open position on the 5, and then cutting off two of the fingering patterns from the pattern, going to 2 and 3. So we hit the next open tone, which is again D flat. Now let's just play those open notes. 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. Again. Now you'll notice the 3rd is missing, and that's because in its bottom end, the horn doesn't support those overtones. So to be able to play an arpeggio, open arpeggio, I have to use the 3rd valve. Why am I using the 3rd valve? Because we're using the open horn and the 3rd valve is 1 valve and it's still bright. If I use 1 and 2, which I can do, it's going to mute it so much from the open note that we're going to hear a major difference in the tone. So let's first try going 1, 3, 5, 1, but this time using the 3rd valve for the 3. 1, 3rd valve, open, open, coming down, 3rd valve. Now do it with the 1st and 2nd valve. See, they both work. Now just try that again, trying it with the 3rd valve and then do it with the 1st and 2nd valve right away and see if you can hear the difference in the tone. See how much more muted it sounds with the 1st and 2nd valve? So again, even though that's what you're taught, that's what your trumpet teacher taught you, there's a real advantage of playing the 3rd valve there because it's brighter. And if I'm playing a lot of open tones, playing 1, 3, 5 up and down open tones, I only want to use 1 valve because I want that tone to be brighter. Now, if I'm playing a slow passage, I want the brighter tone. If I'm playing a fast passage, it wouldn't matter which one we use. But now I can play 1, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 1, right? Try that again. When we go down to the next valve, which would be the 2nd valve, we've now turned the horn into, we've gone from B flat here, now we've gone down to A, and we now are producing the note A. Now even though you think you've been taught it was your B scale, it's actually concert A, pitch A. So in concert pitch A, again I can get 1, and what's the 5th of A is E, right? And then I can get another A, and then I can get C sharp, sharp C, then I can get the E again, and then I can get that 7th flat, we won't go there for now, and then a high 1, which is again A. So if I take and add the 3rd valve to the 2nd valve, so the 3rd on that arpeggio would be played with 1 and 2. So if I'm playing 2nd valve, which is my open A, try that. Then my 3rd is going to be with 1 and 2. And then open to the 2nd valve again. And then still on the 2nd valve. Right, and then coming back down. arpeggio. Now you can carry that all the way up if you want to. Play 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. So try that. And you only have to add that fingering in that one spot. Would be second valve, then 2 and 3, then second valve, second valve, second valve, second valve, coming down, 2 and 3, and then, see? So now that's all the open horn on 2. So by holding down that 2, I essentially have an A open horn. And the only thing I have to do to create the arpeggio is for that lower 3, add the third valve in and let go of it again, okay? So now I can play an A scale. Now let's see if we can figure out the fingering for an A scale. If I had to play, the thing is when you play with guitars, the things they like is A, D, G, and E. And if you can play in those keys, A, D, G, and E, you can play pretty much with any guitar, almost any guitar music that's happening. When we play with pianos like C, F, and G. And those are a lot harder to hit, particularly the C scale, is you'd have to play your D scale to get the C scale on the piano. To get the G scale, you have to play your A scale. And to get the F scale, you have to play your G, what you learned as your G scale. So those aren't as easy to get, particularly the D scale is not as easy to play as what you think the open C scale is. Or in this case, B flat concert. So we have the A horn, and we know that we can produce a C sharp by holding down the second plus the third valve. In other words, just adding in the third valve. And everything on there, 1, 3, 5, 1, 5, 3, 1 is done with the second valve. Da, 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 da. Try that. Da, 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 da. So there's your arpeggio. Okay, and how are we going to get the other notes to the thing? Well, let's just think of it this way. The first one is a 1, and then we have a 5, and we have a 3, that's second and third valve. That's a 3, which is our second plus third valve. What we need is the number 4 in between 3 and 5. Alright, well if 5 is the second valve, then I need to lower it 2 half steps. How can I lower the second valve 2 half steps? By pushing the first and second valve. So if I push the first and second valve, now if you look at that wheel that I put here, okay, we start with the open note, which is our 5th, and in this case we're starting on the number 2, the second valve. To go down 2 half steps, 2 chromatic tones, I'd have to go down to 3. Okay. So if I play this second valve, the 5 with the second valve, and then play a whole step below that by adding in the first valve, so I have 1 plus 2, or I can just play it with 3, the third valve. Because my valve pattern here going backwards just takes me from the valve 2 to valve 3, or valve 1 and 2. I would play it with 3, so it's open. Then 4 goes down to 3. Well, the distance between 4 and 3 is only a half a step, or 1 chromatic tone. So if I got 3 and I want to go down 1 chromatic tone, I add in the 2. However, if I'm like this, I'm screwed. Because I can't add, all I have left is 3 half steps. So I'd have to release this and pull that down to get the same thing. So this is why this fingering is easier in this case than doing this. So my 2 and 3 gives me my third. Now I have to go down to the second note of the scale. So we have 1, which is the second valve. So what would be 2? Well, it turns out that if I hold the 2, if I look at the 2 and rotate backwards, that would be removing valve, or removing notes. And if I want to go from 1, which is my second valve, I skip past the open note and go to 1, 2, and 3. And that would give me that open position. Well, actually, we're starting on, 0. B flat is 0, right? No, we're doing A. We're starting on 2, and we move back 2 steps to 1, 2, and 3. So the second step of the scale should be fingering patterns 1 plus 2 plus 3. So we have, right now for our A scale, second valve, which is A, starting with second valve. Then first, second, and third valve, which is number 2. Then second and third valve, which is our number 3. Then just the third valve, which is the number 4. And then the second valve again, which is 5. So, and then 5, 4, go down 5, 5, down to 4, down to 4, go down to 4, 5, go down to 4, 5, 4, then 3, 2, 1. So what you have is the first 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which would be second valve, first, second, and third valve, second and third valve or 1 and 2, and then 2. And that gives us the first 5 notes. That gives us notes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the scale. Now let's figure out steps 6 and 7 of the scale, okay? The next open tone is what? A high 1. And in A, that high 1 would be played again with the second valve, wouldn't it? And what I need to do is to come down from 1 to 7, I only need to go 1 chromatic tone. So if I'm on my second valve and I need to lower it, I only need to lower it by going down to the next valve position, which in this case would be the first valve. So if I go from the second valve to the first valve, I'd be going from 1 down to 7. So let's give that a try. Play your high and go down 1. So now we've gone from position 2 to valve 1, and that gives us the number 7. Okay, now from 7, we have to go down 2 more chromatic tones to get to the next number, and I don't have it. I've got a 3 and I've got a 1. So what am I going to do? Well, again, I can just look at this circle of valves and say to myself, well, I have to go from the 1 down 2 more steps. So if I go down to 3, down to 2 and 3. You see what's happening? It's like a telephone dial. And you can dial this in any direction. If we dial it clockwise, we're going to be adding tubing and going down 1 step or 2 steps or 3 steps or 4 chromatic steps. If I rotate it in the other direction, I can take any fingering position and subtract valves and sharpen the horn. So what we have to do is we have to go from the open note, which would be A on the second valve, down to valves 2 and 3 to get that 6. So give it a try and let's see what happens right there. Okay. And then third valve, second, third, all of them. And then now what we've done is we just figured out the A scale. But we didn't have to figure out the ABCs of it. We were just able to take 1, 5, 1, and then figure out how many valves we'd have to add to move down.